obviously Matty Dumsney does bikes too, and a few of the other boys, and Max himself when he was racing. Does that any of that translate to sprint car racing at all, or not really?
It's probably, as far as four wheels are concerned, it's probably the closest thing, maybe apart from obviously like rally and stuff, because you got to read the track. The track's evolving all the time, whereas obviously road racing, the track evolves, but not at as great a rate as what it can on dirt. And with bikes, I think there's one facet that I think relates to sprint car racing, and that is you just got to go. There's don't save your tyre, unless you're like an outlaw, and them guys seem like freaks. They're just aliens. But they can feel so much and know so much just from time in the seat that they can kind of feel a tyre get hot. They let it cool down and go again. But
go! And you're doing it, he's in! That's a massive crash, and it's happened immediately! This is amazing! Big shot, and it's lights out, and away we go!
Did you ever do any CIK kart racing, or just skip into the club racing before straight into the sprint car scene?
Pretty much. I mean, CIK at the time, I guess, was realistically on a decline from its heyday, I suppose. I mean, obviously honestly, I don't really keep up that much with it now, but there's obviously CIK now to some extent. I really don't know exactly how it works, but so in the time that I was racing, CIK was kind of in a decline where numbers were dropping. It was just so expensive, We never really went that way. Like as a junior, realistically, we mainly ran J's. It seemed like that's where the field was at, because as a 14, 15-year-old kid racing junior clubman at the time, junior clubman was kind of in a bit of a hole because of the tyre contract at the time. No one liked the tyres, and you had to replace front tyres. Front tyres were wearing out in the space of a club meeting. So pretty much everyone kind of shelved their clubmans to a point, especially in New South Wales. And also at the time was when the ARC water-cooled motors came in, and New South Wales, because of its sort of, I guess, low entries and just across the board, it kind of fell away from the rest of the country, and we're quite behind speed-wise, especially against the Victorians. The Victorians just had everybody covered, and when it came to turning into a senior, CRG again had a bunch of good clubmans. They were kind of tied up with Van Schaik, and Van Schaik was kind of almost, at least one of the motors to have at the time. And so when I went senior, we just went straight to Club and Light, and we were kind of pretty solid straight away.
Yeah. Did you only do any clubby pro races though, like the Brian Farrer Memorial type of stuff?
No, that
really
was kind of quiet, or at least I'm trying to think. I'm sure that race was around when I was racing, but it wasn't as much or as big a deal as it was probably after I stopped.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard thinking back, but I think there was maybe one that I do remember that they had maybe a Clubman Pro race at Eastern Creek. I didn't even know if I
swear they brought you in because you had just started, or you were sprint car racing anyway, but they wanted to the Farleys wanted to bring you back for like the name thing. Not really, no.
So pretty well, once I went sprint car racing, I virtually haven't raced a go-kart since. Maybe once, I think I did a Premier State. Yeah, I did a Premier State Cup round at Eastern Creek, and it was a one-off. I borrowed a go-kart literally the night before. I drove to Castle Hill to pick up a go-kart in a ute and brought it home because I didn't have any go-karts left. I think we must have sold them all. And I must have still had engines because we did run one of my motors. But and that was actually the one of a handful of times that I didn't race a CRG. It was a Red Speed. And,
right.
I literally borrowed it, the Thursday night or Friday night before the race meeting started. And we were okay, but just, I think Belly took me out in a heat race, and so I ended up starting down the back. But yeah, so I didn't do a lot of the Club and Pro stuff. Unfortunately, we kind of missed a bit of that. And I guess to a point, a lot of that came about because numbers were dropping to a point. It wasn't long before I went to Club and Light that you went to an Eastern Creek Club Day and there was an A and a B class because they had that many karts for Club and Light. I suppose on the point where I was jumping to a senior, there was all the tag class was coming in, you had all the push button, all the clutch engines that were coming in, and naturally a lot of people were going that way because it was just easier. You didn't need a second person there to push start you down the hill to get you going for a race, and naturally it's easier when you spin out too. You can just, or you don't even have to start it, you just take off and go back on the track,
Yeah. And obviously for us in that era, we had to learn our lessons for spinning out and not, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I guess for you, going back to, like, as you said, with the motocross stuff, teaching you about certain things compared to a go-kart, obviously Matty Dumsney does bikes too, and a few of the other boys, and Max himself when he was racing. Does that any of that translate to sprint car racing at all, or not really? It's
probably, as far as four wheels are concerned, it's probably the closest thing, maybe apart from obviously like rally and stuff, because you've got to read the track. The track's evolving all the time, whereas, you know, obviously road racing, the track evolves, but not at as great a rate as what it can on dirt, you know. And with bikes, I think there's one facet that I think relates to sprint car racing, and that is you just got to go. You know, there's no, don't save your tired, unless you're like an outlaw, and them guys seem like freaks, you know, they're just aliens. But you know, they can feel so much and know so much just from time in the seat that they can kind of feel a tyre get hot, they let it cool down and go again, you know. But realistically, a race might only go for 6-8 minutes or something, you know, so you really don't have time to stuff around waiting for your tyres to warm up or waiting for the car to come to you. You've got to go and find a part on the racetrack that the car works on and then try and use that to go forward. So, like I say, I think the biggest thing that relates is just that you've got to chase it flat out all the time. You know, you just got to keep pushing. And like I say, the track being so variable, you've got to be able to read it and use multiple different lines to your advantage at any point in time or at any point on the track, you know?
Yeah. And you're chasing the track essentially the whole time because unlike tar racing, the track changes literally every heat, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exponentially. You know, like even, you know, the last race we did at Eastern Creek, we sort of started mid-pack, and for the first 5 laps or so, I thought, oh, gee, I think we're pretty bad here. And then, you know, you kind of clear a couple of cars and change your line, and all of a sudden, hey, the car's fantastic. I was just on the wrong part of the racetrack, you know. So it just changes so quickly. And, you know, like I say, time in the seat's a massive thing for any sport, but particularly sprint car racing, because you just got to be up with keeping your mind on where the track's going and how to read it and when to make the right moves, you know. So, and it's not just in traffic, it's just literally on the racetrack itself.
Yeah. And obviously with Eastern Creek being a lot quicker than, it is technically quicker than Parramatta. Because they tried to design it, from what I've heard, originally the design was meant to go from Parramatta to Eastern Creek, and then the government got involved, and then so on, how it's gone the way it is now. But it's an 11-second track already, and it's got more pace in it, hasn't it?
I don't know. I mean, so I guess I don't know if it's the fastest time this season or not, but we did like an 11.5 there a few weeks ago, and I guess that's about as fast as anyone's gone there this season.
Yeah.
I think the track record at this point is like 11.1 or 2, so it's already like 2 or 3 tenths or 3 or 4 tenths faster than Parramatta was. And obviously Parramatta, you know, cars are time trialling it on it every second week, so there's plenty of opportunities to break the track record. This new track's obviously only had a few races, so look, I dare say the time will possibly drop, but I don't know how much faster it'll go, because as much as they tried to model it off Parramatta, it's really nothing like it. As far as maybe the only thing that might be the same is the fact that it possibly measures 460 metres on the pole line.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's a totally different racetrack. It's a lot rounder. I don't know if it's shorter in the straights, but the size of the corners at least makes it feel shorter in the straights because it's got long, open corners. The corner speed's not a lot slower than the straightaway speed, so you feel like you're kind of just sitting on the same speed the whole way round, which is good and bad. I mean, it doesn't lend itself to great racing, possibly, unless the track's perfect, because it's not exceptionally technical. You know, pretty much you get out there, hold your foot down and hang on and just let the car flow, and you should be able to go pretty fast. Whereas Parramatta, as much as a lot of people probably harp on how great it was, just its layout was virtually perfect for a sprint car track, especially of its size, because it was very technical. Typically, like it always offered an outside line, an inside line, possibly grooves through the middle of the racetrack, and there was always options and things to possibly choose from. So this place, so far at least, it's generally been or lent itself to the inside. Because it's so round, everyone tends to flow the straights out into a big arc, and it just becomes a big circle. So to make the outside work, the inside's got to slow down a lot.
Yeah.
And to carry that speed on the outside, you kind of got to have a good car underneath you, so you feel confident enough to do it, and you got to hope that the racetrack's there for you when you get there.
And what's it like teaching a tar racer? Like is he your boss, Brett, or is he?
I guess at this point he is. Yeah. So obviously another Carter from years ago, but it's hard because the habits you learn your whole life, road racing, you almost throw them out the window.
Yeah.
And that's where I say, like, I think the whole dirt bike thing at this point, for a young kid, it really doesn't matter. You know, all that stuff will translate to whether it's road racing or speedway racing on four wheels later down the track. But like I say, you come from road racing, you're just so in tune with, or it's such a habit that you get to the end of the straight and roll off the throttle.
Yeah.
You know, there's no corner in the world other than, you know, corners that really aren't corners.
Yeah.
That you just get to the corner and either stand on the throttle harder or at least hold it where it was. Basically, you know, you just don't do that in any other form of motorsport. And for the cars to work properly, you kind of need to be on the throttle. If you get off the throttle, then they feel really awkward.
Yeah.
They're really softly sprung, but unless you're on the throttle, it kind of keeps the car planted. But like I say, you get off the throttle, then the cars sort of stand up. Everything feels like you're on a pogo stick and tends to roll over to the right-hand side. And if you roll to the right in a sprint car at the speed you're doing with holes and other cars around you, typically it feels pretty
sketchy.
Pretty sketchy, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, just the biggest thing is just trying to get anyone that's new to it to try and stay on the throttle, because it goes against everything you've ever learned.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest hurdle.
That's what I try to explain with Brooke, because I've taken her go-karting and stuff, and she actually wants to do that ladies' day, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what I learned when we were doing electric karts when we say that, and I had to learn, especially because it was different, I said to Dan, to like a road car. As I figured out with these electrics, there was two problems with them. You actually never wanted to hit the brake, because once you tapped off the accelerator, it actually naturally slowed itself, which was weird.
Yeah, right.
You would just not expect that. But then they also, as we learned from the guys, if you were hitting the accelerator too hard for too long, they just sort of cut out on you anyway.
Yeah,
I
right.
thought the guys were turning it off on me or something, and I was like, what is going on? Like, what?
Yeah.
I'm losing power here.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that's similar. And the other question I had for you is then, you know, you're teaching these guys, you said, to just stay on that throttle and go around. Is there a mental side to it as well? Because you're in a shorter area than, say, the tar racers who've got a bigger track to go around, and you've just got to keep your mind going around. Is there anything that you guys do different to, say, because you've been on the tar as well, in terms of how you focus around that and just...
Not really. The biggest thing in speedway, typically, especially sprint cars, is just how quick things happen. And as much as... you can drive really fast circuit cars, obviously. Yep. And unless it's something like maybe Formula One or something, I guess might be similar. But
Formula Ford is what I do. so I like to hang it on the throttle like you. Yeah.
But just how quick things come up, you know, like when you're going around a track at, say, 12 seconds, you know, there's not a lot of time for a break or a breather or a time to think. From getting out of one corner and going into the next. So I think that's the big thing, that coming from a large circuit racing background would be hard to handle or harder to handle in sprint cars. Obviously, the terminal speed's not there. You're not doing 300 kilometres an hour, but just physically how quick things are happening.
Yeah.
It is mentally draining, and it's just something that I guess any racer can get on top of it. It's just a matter of doing the laps and becoming comfortable with it. But to that point, mentally, no, there's nothing you can really do to prepare. You've just got to do it.
Yeah.
And staying on the throttle and all that sort of stuff, again, it's just doing laps and working the car out, obviously getting to the point where you're comfortable in where the car's going to do what it's going to do, and you can kind of preempt what it's going to do, because there's nothing worse than getting to the end of a straight and going, I'm not sure which way this car's going to go.
Yeah.
And then someone's in your ear before the race saying, hey, just when you get there, just stay on it, don't roll out, you know. And you've got this feeling like, I don't know if it's going to make it. But so once it's kind of like, I kind of like seeing it as falling off a cliff, you know, like you're kind of on the edge of this cliff and you're freaking out, like, I'm not sure if the car's capable or if I'm capable or whatever, but once you sort of fall off the cliff and you stay on the floor or at least into the throttle, all of a sudden the car works better and you go, holy crap, why wasn't I doing that before?
Yeah.
You know, like the car works, like it feels like a Formula 1 car now. It feels like an Indy car or something, you know?
Yeah.
Before that point, they just feel ugly. Yeah. If you're not going fast enough, they just feel ugly. They're not designed to go under the speed that they're designed to do.
Yeah, and you obviously got I think it was the fastest lap ever around Parramatta Speedway before it shut too.
Yeah. So we can claim that forever now.
Yeah, so that's in the books.
Yeah, and that just by chance we've actually put that motor in for tomorrow night. We had an issue a couple of weeks ago, so we've got the Parramatta's fastest motor in for this weekend.
Yeah, right.
So we'll see what it can do. But so that's pretty cool. Not something I guess I ever really aimed for, or I guess it's just one of those things that it's a byproduct of just going out and trying to do the best you can. But we got it, and it stood for quite a while too. So to break it the first time was cool, and then we broke it a few months later again. So I think for a long time there we'll probably maybe the fastest car at Parramatta, just we didn't always win, and that's the hard part.
How many track championship, club championships, or how many of them did you win though? Did you win a few though?
Just the one.
Just the one.
Just the one.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were sort of always around, the top 5 or 3 or whatever for quite a few years there. When basically ever since the whole rocket thing started. I mean, prior to that, I'd never actually done a whole season at least to be in the contention for points, but.
That was due to budget, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. And look, when we didn't have the budget, we'd always try and hit some of the bigger races, and naturally, Christmas time's always when the bigger races are on and the big money's on. And I don't, looking back on it, I don't know if that was the best way to go, because really, you turn up at Christmas time and you haven't had a lot of seat time, and all of a sudden they've brought a couple of Yanks over to race against, and it's pretty tough. But I mean, look, we did have some success. We didn't win any races or anything, but we ran pretty solid a few times. But realistically, I look back and think maybe we would have been better off doing the club level stuff, as much as it would have been more a big fish in a small pond, possibly. At least we would have had a chance to be in the limelight, and then maybe from that you get a bit more support and run the big stuff anyway,
Yeah.
But yeah, so we won one track championship, and it was tight. Like when I say tight, it was like 2 points, which was in.
Who was in it? That was at Farr.
Robbie Farr. Yeah, he was the guy to beat. I mean, as I said before, we were possibly the fastest car there regularly, but Robbie was the man to beat. Like as far as an outfit's concerned, and an experienced driver and excellent outfit and team, they were just the whole package. So they were always going to be tough to beat, whether they quick timed or not. Like they're always going to be there at the end.
Yeah, and he was with like essentially a professional team where you're like a privateer coming with rocket backing that year, and you had to put everything into it to win that championship, didn't you?
Yeah,
essentially.
I mean,
just stay consistent.
You do everything you can naturally to do the best you can, obviously, and obviously everyone does that. And look, Robert, and the East Coast Pipeline team, like I said, and that team still is one of the best outfits in the country, and Robert's still one of the best drivers in the country, obviously. But they're always going to be really tough to beat. We just had to be consistent and finish races and do the best we could, really. I mean, obviously, like I say, we had a really good package. It was just a matter of, putting every night together. Yeah,
and I remember when I was watching you, obviously from karts on the hill and stuff like that, I remember meeting your first sponsor, essentially Fleck Earth Moving.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, on the hill, and he told me that he sponsored you and stuff like that. And I remember... Obviously, JV rang me the other day as well, saying like you guys started, you and your dad. Obviously, your dad had raced. We'll talk about him soon, but your dad and yourself started with like basically just off the trailer, open trailer, put the car off, and you and your dad would literally just be like kind of unnoticed, but still quick, and just doing your own thing. And then you'd build up from one sponsor, and then you got to. Can you tell me about like your time where you were pretty much unsponsored to getting the first Fleck Earth Moving deal?
Yeah. So obviously, coming from karts, like I went. Karts to sprint cars, essentially. And it was all, like everything, it's just circumstantial. I mean, my uncle, who's also been involved in sprint car racing, Peter Johnson, for a long time, at the time, the World of Outlaws Down Under events were on, and there was a lot of secondhand World of Outlaw equipment being shipped out and available. So he sort of said, well, hey, to my dad, if you go buy a car, I'm going to buy this other deal out and you can run one of the motors. So that's how it sort of began. And like you said, we didn't have a lot of money naturally, and I certainly didn't have any. I was still at school at the time.
Yeah.
So we went racing and went pretty good, really, pretty quick. Just unfortunately, it's an expensive sport, and you blow motors and not so much crash gear. We didn't tear up a lot of stuff, but just motors were the big thing, and they still are the most expensive part of the sport, other than maybe tyres if you can get them, which is a bit of a sore point at the moment. It's just hard to get sprint car tyres, but engines are really expensive, and obviously to have good ones and keep them up to date and well maintained is it's an expensive sort of venture. So look, we didn't have a lot, but as far as the racing that we did do, we always seemed to be competitive. And at points we I think at one stage I had nearly 18 months off. I'd to be honest, gotten kind of sick of it, sick of trying and not really getting anything from it other than, naturally I enjoyed it, but it's hard to enjoy it when you feel like you're bashing your head against a wall and not getting anywhere. So really to sort of the point with Fleck, we'd sort of had a hiatus and thought, hey, let's give it one last crack, and we came back and did a few races and Fleck, so Jamie and Lisa, I'd known and my family had known for years as friends, and they said, hey, we're interested in sponsoring a car, and naturally they sort of come to us because of the friendship we had, and it all sort of worked out, and the first night we put their name on the car, we won.
Want to hear more? Each week we will share the hottest clips from our guest interviews on YouTube. But to hear the full episode, make sure to subscribe or follow us on your favourite podcast platform.